The wedding contract was a trap until the heartless millionaire held her like someone he couldn't. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let us return to our main character. The whispers hit her before she even reached the altar, sharp and needling like cold rain against bare skin. Does she really think he'll ever love her? Look at Adrian. He looks like he's walking to a funeral, not his wedding. Elara kept her gaze forward, fingers trembling around the bouquet. The chandeliers above glittered like ice, and the entire ballroom felt too big, too silent, too watchful. Her heels clicked against the marble in a rhythm that sounded disturbingly like a countdown. Every step she took reminded her she did not belong here, not in this world of wealth, not beside the man waiting for her at the end of the aisle. Adrian Blackwell stood unmoving, expression carved from stone. He didn't glance at her, didn't offer a hand, didn't blink. $1 million statue in a perfect suit, but when she finally reached him, he leaned slightly forward, his mouth brushing her ear as he whispered, cold enough to steal the breath from her chest. Don't look at me like you expect something. I'm not the man you wanted to marry, and you're not the woman I chose. The words crushed something fragile inside her. Yet 1 minute later, when her heel caught the edge of the step and she stumbled, the same man who rejected her spun instantly, arms wrapping around her with shocking force, as if he were afraid she might vanish into air. And in that heartbeat, Elara felt something she wasn't supposed to feel at this wedding of strangers' warmth. She straightened quickly, pulling herself from the shelter of his arms, though her body still remembered the shape of him. Adrian released her at once, jaw tightening, eyes guarded. The officiant cleared his throat. Shall we begin? They faced each other. Elara lifted her eyes just enough to take in his sharp features, the distant storm in his gaze. He didn't look cruel. He looked wounded, as if this wedding was a cage neither of them had asked for. She held her bouquet tighter. Memories of the debt notice at home flashed across her mind, her mother's shaking hands as she begged Elara to save them. She had agreed to this marriage because she had no choice. She knew Adrian didn't choose her, but she hadn't imagined he'd say it to her face. The vows began. Elara repeated hers softly, voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. When it was Adrian's turn, a heavy silence fell. Every guest leaned forward, sensing the tension curdling in the air. The officiant said carefully, Adrian Blackwell, take Elara Ward to be your wife? Adrian's lips parted. Nothing came out. A ripple of discomfort moved through the guests. Elara's heart thudded painfully. She risked a glance up at him. His gaze wasn't cold anymore. It was fractured, full of something raw she couldn't decipher. He exhaled sharply, as though forcing himself to breathe. Yes, he said at last, the words sounding dragged from him rather than chosen. But he didn't look at her. He slid the ring onto her finger quickly, almost mechanically. Yet his hand trembled. Only for a second, but she felt it. A subtle quake beneath the veneer of control. She wanted to believe it meant something. She couldn't afford to. When her turn came, Elara slipped the ring onto his hand. The gold band glinted against his skin. His fingers brushed hers too briefly to be intentional, too lingering to be an accident. The officiant lifted his hands. By the power vested, a soft gasp flowed through the room as a gust of wind swept through the open archway behind them, lifting her veil. Fabric fluttered upward, blinding her for a moment. She wobbled on her heels. The marble floor slipped under her. She fell forward, and he caught her again. Not gently, desperately. His hand pressed to her back, steadying her, and his arm locked around her waist like a reflex buried too deep to control. She felt the rapid thud of his heart against her ribs, nothing like the cold man he pretended to be. Elara, he breathed so quietly she wasn't sure she heard it. When the veil settled and she could see again, dozens of eyes were on them, whispering, speculating, wondering why the heartless Blackwell heir was holding his bride like a man afraid to lose her. Adrian realized it too. His arms loosened instantly, jaw snapping back into its hardened line. He stepped away as though her touch burned. The officiant cleared his throat harder this time. You may now seal your vows." The room held its breath. Adrian looked at her, then really looked. Not with hatred, not with indifference, but with a storm of conflict that frightened her more than anger ever could. He leaned in slightly close enough for only her to hear. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for dragging you into this." Her breath caught. What did that mean? Before she could ask, he straightened and brushed a cold kiss against her cheek instead of her lips, a calculated gesture for the audience rather than for her. When they turned to face the applauding crowd, Elara forced herself to smile. But inside, one question echoed louder than any vow spoken that day. If he didn't choose her, then what was this marriage really built on? The door clicked shut behind them, sealing the two of them inside the enormous bridal suite that felt more like a museum than a place meant for a newly married couple. Crystal lamps cast a cool glow over the white and silver room, elegant and sterile. Adrian stopped 3 steps ahead of her, shoulders rigid beneath his tailored suit. "We may share a roof," he said without turning, "but we don't have to live as husband and wife." The words hit harder than the vows he'd barely forced out at the altar. Elara's throat tightened, but she managed to quiet. "I understand." She didn't. Not fully. Not yet. Adrian picked up a folded blanket from the wardrobe and placed it on the sofa without meeting her eyes. The unspoken message was clear. She looked at the king-size bed untouched, crisp, and something inside her wilted. "I won't bother you," she said softly. "Good." He said it too quickly, too sharply, as if he needed the distance to breathe. Elara swallowed her hurt and moved toward the bathroom to change out of the heavy dress. In the hallway, faint voices drifted through the cracked doorway of the adjacent sitting room. She paused, realizing they belonged to members of Adrian's family. A woman murmured, "She looks overwhelmed. Poor thing doesn't know she won't last." Another voice, a man's, chuckled lightly. "Adrian will never let her close. She's temporary. They all are." Elara's chest tightened, shame burning through her skin. She took a step back, but the floor creaked beneath her heel. The voices stopped. A new voice crept from behind her. "You shouldn't listen to them." She spun to find Adrian in the hallway, shadows cutting sharp angles across his face. His tone was flat, but there was a flicker annoyance. Concern before he masked it. "I didn't mean to overhear," she whispered. "It doesn't matter what they say. Just stay out of their way." He turned as if to leave, but she reached for a shred of courage. "Did I do something wrong?" His back rose with a slow breath. When he faced her again, his expression was unreadable. "The only mistake you made," he said quietly, "was agreeing to this marriage." Her heart sagged. She stepped aside to let him pass. He didn't. For a fleeting second, neither moved. Then he blinked hard and brushed past her, leaving only the faint scent of cedar and something darker behind him. Alone again, Elara pressed a hand over her chest, trying to ease the ache. She changed into a simple nightgown, washed her face, then returned to the suite, only to find Adrian sitting at the edge of the sofa, elbows on his knees, head bowed. The blanket he'd placed there remained untouched. "You can take the bed," she said quietly. "It's fine." His voice was low, strained. "You need the rest more than I do." She hesitated. "I appreciate your concern." He looked up sharply as though the word concern offended him. "It isn't concern, it's practicality." But that wasn't true. She saw it, the tension in his jaw, the exhaustion in his eyes, the heaviness of something unspoken pressing on him. "I'll be in the bedroom if you need anything," she said, unsure why she offered. "I won't." She nodded and retreated into the bedroom. Only when the door clicked shut did she allow her breath to escape in a shaky sigh. She climbed into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind spun with whispers, rejection, and the confusing warmth of his arms at the altar. Sometime past midnight, a soft thud sounded in the suite. Elara sat up. Through the narrow gap beneath the door, she saw a broken stripe of light. Curiosity tugged her from bed. She opened the door just enough to peek out. Adrian was standing near the balcony windows, back turned, one hand gripping the curtain as though holding himself together. The other hand covered his eyes. His posture wasn't cold, it was defeated. Before she could retreat, he lowered his hand and saw her reflection in the window. "Elara," he said softly. She froze. He turned. His eyes trailed over her pale face, the way she held her arms to steady herself. "You're awake." "I heard something." His gaze dropped to the floor. I didn't mean to disturb you. You didn't. Silence stretched between them. Then, to her surprise, he stepped closer. Not enough to touch, but enough for her to see how tense his breathing was. You're still not feeling well, he murmured. Your fever hasn't fully broken. She blinked. How do you know that? You were trembling during the ceremony, he said almost defensively. And again just now. Her heart lurched. He had noticed. He always noticed. He reached for a tray she hadn't seen him prepare: a cup of warm tea, a glass of water, and medicine. You should take this. Elara stared. You made tea for me. His brows drew together, as if he regretted it instantly. It's nothing. Just drink it. She accepted the cup. The warmth seeped into her palms, into the part of her chest that had felt cold since the vows. When she took a sip, he relaxed almost imperceptibly. I don't understand you, she whispered. You say you don't want me near you. Yet you keep. She hesitated. He finished for her, caring. Her breath hitched. He looked away, jaw clenched. I don't want to. It just happens. The confession hung between them, fragile and electric. Before she could form a response, he stepped past her abruptly, reaching for the door to retreat to the sofa. Then something on his desk caught her eye, a silver frame half hidden beneath a folder. When Adrian noticed where she was looking, he stiffened. Elara, he warned, but she'd already reached for it. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the frame. She lifted it. The picture inside stole her breath. Adrian stood with his arm around a young woman, laughing openly, freely, beautifully, a version of him she had never seen. And the woman, she looked almost exactly like Elara. Her stomach dropped. Carefully, she set the frame back down. Who is she? She asked, voice barely a whisper. Adrian didn't answer. He couldn't. The silence was louder than any truth he could have spoken. Elara's fingers tightened around the picture frame before she forced herself to set it down. The woman in the photo, her smile bright, her hand looped around Adrian's arm, looked so much like her that Elara's skin prickled. The resemblance was undeniable. Too close, too deliberate. A breath stirred the air behind her. Who told you you could come in here? Adrian's voice was low, strained, and far too close. She turned slowly. He stood in the doorway of his office. Shoulders squared, eyes shadowed in a way she hadn't seen before, dark, defensive, almost afraid. He wasn't angry she had seen the photo. He was afraid she had touched a wound he'd never meant to reveal. I didn't mean to intrude, she whispered. His jaw tightened. He stepped past her, took the frame from the desk and set it face down with careful precision, though his hands trembled slightly. This isn't something you should involve yourself in, he said. That woman. Elara swallowed. Was she someone you loved? Adrian's breath hitched barely but enough. He turned away, staring out the window where city lights flickered like distant stars. This has nothing to do with you, he replied, voice clipped. But the tension in his shoulders told a different story. Elara opened her mouth to speak again, but a soft shuffle at the door drew her attention. Mrs. Hall, the elder housekeeper, stood there holding a folded towel, her expression conflicted. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hall said, eyes darting between them. I didn't mean to interrupt. Elara shook her head gently and squeezed past her, but the older woman touched her arm lightly. Miss Ward, she murmured in a tone so soft it barely reached the air, if you want to survive in this house, don't let yourself care too much. Elara blinked. What do you mean? Mrs. Hall's gaze shifted toward the closed office door, her voice dropping even lower. The last woman who cared, left in pieces. A chill swept through Elara. Who was she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Mrs. Hall didn't reply directly. Instead, she whispered, some people carry storms in their hearts. Loving them is dangerous, not because they hurt others, but because they hurt themselves. Then she stepped back and disappeared down the hall, leaving Elara with more questions than answers. Later that afternoon, Elara found herself wandering through the east corridor, drawn by a faint memory of something Mrs. Hallwall had once said about rooms that hold ghosts without haunting. She stopped at a door with a gold plaque, its lock oddly polished. She pushed it open. The room was untouched, preserved like a memory suspended in time. A piano stood near the window, its surface spotless despite the layer of dust covering the rest of the furnishings. Someone had been caring for it, someone who still couldn't let go. On the piano lay a sheet of music handwritten but unfinished. The title read, 4A. Elara brushed her fingers across the faded ink. Beneath the title, almost hidden by a fold in the paper, was a small scribbled note. Don't blame him. Blame me. Her breath caught. This wasn't a room abandoned by a forgotten lover. This was a shrine of grief. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning photographs on the shelves, most turned face down, but one had slipped just enough to reveal a familiar soft smile. The woman from the office photograph. Elara reached for it. You shouldn't be in this room. Adrian's voice came from the doorway, but this time it wasn't cold. It was brittle, as if the very air would shatter if she spoke too loudly. He stepped inside, took the photo from her hands, and placed it gently where it had been. His fingers lingered on the frame, his chest rising and falling with a silent weight. She left, he said quietly. And she's not coming back. Elara's heart clenched. She didn't know whether to offer comfort or step away. Was it because of you? She asked softly. Adrian let out a hollow laugh, bitter and sharp. If only it were that simple. No. She left because I wasn't enough to make her stay. That didn't feel like the truth, or at least not the whole of it. I'm sorry, Elara said. His gaze flicked to hers, conflicted. Don't be. None of this is your burden. But wasn't it? She was living in the shadow of someone she hadn't even known existed until an hour ago. You told me I was your mistake, she said quietly. But now I think you mean something else. Adrian didn't respond. Instead, he walked past her shoulders, rigid, and shut the piano lid with a soft but final click. Don't come in here again, he said, not turning back. Some memories are safer left untouched. Elara nodded, but her gaze drifted toward the floor. Something had fallen from the edge of the piano. She crouched to pick it up. A small wooden box. She opened it before she could think better of it. Inside were files organized, labeled clinical, a list of names, women, all marked assessed, psychological profiles, compatibility notes, and at the bottom, her name. Elara Ward, approved. Her stomach dropped. Her fingers went cold. She closed the box immediately, but Adrian had already frozen. Elara, he said sharply. She looked up, eyes stinging. Why am I on this list? He didn't answer. He couldn't, and in that silence she realized the truth. She hadn't been chosen by fate. She'd been selected, measured, matched, not for who she was, but for who she reminded him of. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, Am I your wife, Adrian, or just her shadow? He flinched as if struck, and for the first time since the wedding, he had no words at all. Adrian's hand closed around her wrist before she could step out of the room, not rough but tight enough that she felt the tremor in his fingers. The door slammed behind them, echoing down the silent corridor as he pulled her toward the wall, eyes dark with something between fury and fear. Why were you digging through things that don't concern you? He said, voice, a low rasp that vibrated through the narrow space between them. Elara held his gaze, refusing to shrink back even though her heart hammered. Because I need to know whether I'm your wife, or the shadow of a woman who left you. His breath caught. For a moment, just one, the facade cracked. Pain flickered sharp, unguarded before he forced it down again. You don't understand what you're asking, he said, jaw tight. Then make me understand. He turned away, abruptly releasing her wrist, but the echo of his touch lingered. There are things in this house you're better off not knowing. She stepped toward him, voice softening. I'm already part of this house, of your life, whether you want me to be or not. That made him stop. His shoulders rose with a slow, strangled breath. When he finally faced her again, the anger was gone. Only exhaustion remained, deep, bone-tired, and unbearably lonely. Elara, he said quietly, not every truth heals when exposed. She swallowed. Not every secret protects. Something in his expression fractured. He hesitated, then stepped aside, letting her go. She walked past him, but before she could reach the stairs, his palm hit the wall beside her head, blocking her path. Don't walk away from me, he said, voice cracked but firm. Not like this. Her breath trembled. You said I shouldn't care. I never said I didn't want you to. The admission stunned her. For a moment neither moved. The dim light from the chandeliers painted both their shadows long against the walls. merging and pulling apart with every uneven breath. Finally, Elara lifted a hand to the doorknob of their room. "I'm tired, Adrian. We can talk tomorrow." She slipped inside and closed the door before he could respond, but she didn't hear footsteps leaving. Instead, a soft thud landed against the other side of the door, Adrian leaning there silent, his presence a weight she could feel through the wood. Her throat tightened. The image of his broken expression clung to her as she lay down fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. She didn't know how long she remained awake, but she heard the faint scrape of his shoulder against the door each time he shifted. Hours later, cold air seeped through the balcony doors. Elara shivered. A fever had begun to pulse behind her eyes. Too many tears, too little rest. She curled deeper into the blankets, but the chill wouldn't leave. When she opened her eyes again, Adrian was kneeling beside the bed. He must have slipped in while she slept. His palm rested gently on her forehead, his brows drawn with worry that softened his entire face. "You're burning up," he whispered almost to himself. "Of course you are." She blinked groggily. What are you doing here, taking care of you?" His tone was clipped, but his fingers lingered on her temple before he forced himself to withdraw. "You should have said something." She let out a weak, humorless laugh. "I thought you didn't want me near you. That's not—" He broke off, jaw tightening. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" His silence was answer enough. Adrian rose and poured water into a glass, helping her sit upright with a gentleness that made her chest ache. His hand brushed her cheek as he steadied her, and he froze as if surprised by the instinct. "Drink," he murmured. She obeyed. Warmth bloomed through her, though not from the water. When she lay back down, he hesitated at the edge of the bed. "I shouldn't have said you were a mistake," he said. "You weren't. This situation is. All of it." Her lashes fluttered. "Then tell me the truth. Why did your family choose me?" His throat bobbed. He looked away. "Because you're strong, gentler than you know. And because he exhaled shakily, "they think you can stabilize me." Her chest tightened. "Like a treatment." "No," he said sharply, gaze snapping to hers. "Like someone who feels too much, like she did." Elara's breath hitched. "Liana." His eyes darkened, not with anger but fear. Real fear. "That's the part you still don't understand," he whispered. "I don't want to love again. I don't want to." His voice broke. "Because I don't know how to survive losing someone twice." The confession landed heavy between them, a truth shaped by years of grief. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his hand lightly. Adrian stared at their joined fingers as if the world narrowed to that single point of contact. "Elara," he said, almost pleading, "don't make this harder." "I'm not trying to," she whispered. I want to understand you." "You shouldn't," he murmured. "You'll get hurt." "Maybe," she said. "But maybe you will too." His breath shuddered. His hand tightened around hers for just a second, one stolen, fragile moment where he let himself feel. Then he pulled away as if burned, stumbling back. "I can't," he whispered. He turned, reaching for the door, but before he left, he added softly, "Don't go into that room again, for your sake." When the door closed behind him, the room felt colder. But on the floor near the balcony, something caught her eye, a tiny slip of paper she must have missed earlier. Her name wasn't written on it, but Liana's was, and beneath it the words, "If you want answers, look where the music ends." Elara clutched the note, her pulse quickening. Whatever truth lay ahead, Adrian had been protecting her from it, but not anymore. The piano room waited for her at dawn, quiet as a held breath. Elara stepped inside, clutching the slip of paper with Liana's name on it. The morning light filtered through sheer curtains, dust particles drifting like suspended secrets. The piano bench sat slightly askew as if someone had left it in a hurry long ago. She knelt beside the instrument and searched beneath the drawers until her fingers brushed against a thin piece of ribbon. A letter, pale, carefully folded, soft at the corners from being handled, slid out into her palm. A blue ribbon tied it shut. Across the front, in delicate handwriting, were the words, "For the one who will replace me." Elara's heart stuttered. She sat on the bench, untied the ribbon, and opened the letter. "If you are reading this, it means I made the right choice. And it means Adrian is not alone." The first line blurred before her eyes. She blinked hard and continued, "I loved him, That is the truth I could never outrun. But love is not always staying. Sometimes it's stepping aside so the person you cherish can breathe again. Elara gripped the edges of the paper, breath thinning. I did not leave because he failed me. I left because I was failing him. A tremor passed through her. She read on. I was sick when I met Adrian. Not the kind of sickness that showed, but the kind that slowly steals your ability to face your own reflection. I was drowning and he kept trying to pull me back up, even as it dragged him under with me. She paused, chest tight. This wasn't the story she'd imagined. Not betrayal, not abandonment, something infinitely more heartbreaking. The letter continued. He would have given up everything for me, his future, his inheritance, his well-being, and I could not be the reason his world caved in, so I did what he could never do. I walked away. Elara pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. She could almost see Liana writing these words, each stroke etched with guilt and love. There is something else you must know. Alara's pulse quickened. I did not leave alone. I left with the weight of knowing he would search for me. And he did. For 3 years he looked for a ghost I forced myself to become. She exhaled shakily. No wonder Adrian still carried shadows beneath his skin. The next paragraph was written in softer strokes. When they chose you, I knew. You are not a replacement. You are a chance. Her breath caught. They looked for someone who could calm the storms inside him, someone who wouldn't run from the way he loves fiercely, terribly, wholly, someone who could stay where I could not. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she realized she was crying. Because you and I share something. Not our faces, not our stories, but the same kind of heart. Elara closed her eyes. The ache inside her softened, not gone, but shifting into something she couldn't yet name. Footsteps sounded behind her. She turned. Mrs. Hall stood in the doorway, hands clasped, expression lined with years of watching this family unravel themselves. You found it, she said softly. Elara nodded, wiping her face. She wasn't sick, she whispered, not the way people think. Mrs. Hall sighed. No, but she was breaking, and she believed leaving would save him. Elara swallowed. Did Adrian know any of this? He knew pieces. Mrs. Hall said, not enough, never enough. Elara looked back at the letter, and he blames himself, every day. Mrs. Hall stepped further into the room. But he loved her, and her leaving nearly destroyed him. Elara folded the letter gently. He still loves her, doesn't he? Mrs. Hall hesitated. He grieves her. That is different. Alara's chest tightened. And me, that the older woman said quietly, is what he's afraid to confront. A soft knock interrupted them. Adrian stood in the doorway, breathing hard like he had run here. His eyes swept the room until they locked onto the letter in her hand. Color drained from his face. Elara, he said hoarsely, did you? I read it, she said. Something raw flickered across his features. Fear, guilt, something deeper. She left because she thought she was ruining you, Elara whispered. She sacrificed her own happiness to protect yours. Adrian's hands curled at his sides. I didn't want her to go. I know, she murmured. That's why she did. He dragged a hand through his hair, pacing once, twice. You shouldn't have read that. Why not? Her voice cracked. It explains everything. No, he snapped, but the anger wasn't directed at her. It was a shield against himself. It explains her, not me. Then tell me, she said, rising to her feet. Tell me why you shut me out. Tell me why you look at me like you're terrified of something you won't name. He looked at her, then really looked, his composure fracturing. Because I don't know how to lose someone again, he said, voice shaking. And you make me feel everything I fought so hard to bury. Her breath faltered. This marriage wasn't supposed to mean anything, he whispered. But you're not hurt, Elara. You're not a shadow. You're the first warmth I've felt in years. And I don't know how to handle that. Her heart stumbled in her chest. Before she could speak, his gaze dropped to the letter in her hand. Put it away, he said softly. Some parts of the past shouldn't decide the future. But Elara wasn't sure which future he meant, hers or his. As he turned to leave, she realized with a strange aching clarity, Adrian wasn't pushing her away because she was Liana's echo. He was pushing her away because she wasn't. The power went out just as Elara opened her mouth to answer him. A heavy snap, then darkness swallowed the room whole. The windows rattled from a sudden gust outside, and the chandelier above them flickered before dying completely. Elara sucked in a breath. She couldn't see him, but she felt the shift of air as he moved closer. Elara, Adrian said, voice low in the dark. Don't leave. His hand brushed hers, searching, uncertain. Then he found her shoulder and held it not tightly, but with the desperation of someone afraid of losing their tether to the world. Adrian, she whispered, I don't want you walking away, not right now. The admission settled between them like fragile glass. His fingertips hovered near her cheek but didn't touch. Even in the dark, she sensed the tremor in him. When the lights flickered back on, he stepped away so fast it felt like the moment had shattered. He turned his back, shoulders rigid. Forget what I said. I can't, she whispered. He exhaled sharply, as if wishing he could pull the words back into his lungs. It was nothing. It wasn't nothing, she said. You're not nothing, so stop pretending. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He just looked exhausted from fighting battles she still didn't fully understand. Elara's head swayed, dizzy from the fever she thought she'd shaken. She steadied herself on the table, but Adrian was there, instantly catching her elbow. You're burning again, he muttered. I told you to rest. You told me a lot of things, she murmured, but none of them match how you act. He froze. She could feel him trying to shut down and retreat into that cold shell he used as armor, but his hand stayed on her arm, warm and steady. Sit, he said quietly. She sank onto the edge of the bed. Adrian poured water, added medicine, brought her a blanket. His movements were precise, controlled, except for the way his hands shook when they brushed against her hair. You don't have to take care of me, she whispered. I know. His voice was a thread, but I want to. That admission, simple and soft, hit harder than any declaration could have. She watched him silently, searching his face. His walls were fractured now, light slipping through the cracks. Adrian, she said softly, you act like caring is a crime. He looked away. It feels like one. Why? His throat bobbed. He didn't answer. She reached forward, gently cupping his hand in both of hers. His breath stilled completely. If you don't want me here, she said carefully, just tell me. Say it clearly. I'll leave. His fingers tightened around hers at once, reflexive, fierce. No, he said hoarsely. Don't say that. Don't even think it. Her heartbeat tripped. Then what do you want? His expression twisted as if she'd asked the one question he couldn't outrun. What I want, he said slowly, painfully, is the one thing I'm afraid I can't have. Her lips parted. What is that? He whispered. The world narrowed until it was only the two of them. Her breath, his pulse, the space shrinking between them. He leaned in almost without realizing it, eyes tracing her face as if memorizing something fleeting. Her gaze dropped to his mouth. He bent closer. Elara, he breathed inches from her lips. If I kiss you now, I won't be able to stop. She felt the confession like a spark under her skin. Then don't stop, she whispered, barely audible. Something fierce flashed in his eyes, want, fear, hunger, restraint, but he tore himself back with visible effort. He stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair. I can't, he said, voice raw. If I let myself love you, if I let myself feel anything again, I'm terrified of what might happen to you. Her chest tightened. You think loving me will hurt me? I know it will, he snapped, anguish cracking his control. It destroyed me once. I won't let it happen again. He turned away, bracing himself on the balcony railing. She watched the fight inside him. His breath fogged the glass, his fists clenched. She stepped toward him. Adrian, your past doesn't make you dangerous. He shook his head. You don't understand. My family sees weakness as a threat. Anyone close to me becomes a target. Why do you think Liana left? Why do you think she was forced? He cut himself off too late. Elara's eyes widened. Forced? What do you mean, forced, Adrian? What did they do to her? He swore under his breath, turning away again. I shouldn't have said that. Tell me. No. She grabbed his hand. Tell me. His eyes met hers, burning, haunted. If you knew what they were capable of, you'd run. I'm not running. She squeezed his hand. Not from you. He stared at her as though she'd said something impossible. Then a knock echoed down the corridor. Muffled voices, his mother's cold tone floated through the hall. She's getting too close, she said to someone unseen. Call her. Tell her to come back. Elara stiffened. Adrian did too. Who was she talking about? Elara whispered. Adrian's jaw locked. Someone who should have stayed gone. The corridor fell silent again, leaving only the two of them standing there, hearts pounding in the quiet. Elara, Adrian said softly, almost afraid to speak the words, "I don't want to lose you." She stepped closer, letting her forehead rest against his chest. Then, "Don't let go." For one unguarded moment, he wrapped his arms around her tight grounding reel. His breath trembled against her hair, but then his phone rang. A name flashed on the screen. A name Elara never expected to see again. Adrian's face drained of color. "Liana," he said, voice barely a whisper. "Where are you?" Elara's world tilted as she realized the past wasn't just returning, it was knocking at their door. The iron gates groaned open just as Adrian ended the call, and a chill swept across the driveway. Elara stood beside him on the marble steps, heart pounding so hard she feared he could hear it. A black car rolled to a slow halt, its headlights fading. A woman stepped out, thin, graceful, almost ethereal, her hair swept back by the wind, her coat fluttering like torn wings. She paused beneath the lantern light, and when she lifted her gaze, Elara felt something twist sharply in her chest. Liana, not a ghost, not a memory, real. Adrian took a single step forward, breath shuddering out of him. "Liana, is it really you?" She smiled, soft, tired, devastating. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to disappear forever." He reached out as if afraid she would fade again, but he stopped short of touching her. The restraint in him looked painful. Elara stayed frozen where she was, her fingers curled into the fabric of her dress. The pieces of the past were no longer puzzle fragments. They were standing right in front of her. Liana's gaze flickered to her, then lingering with curious intensity. "You must be Elara." Elara nodded, unsure what to feel. "Yes, you look—" Liana hesitated, eyes softening. "Nothing like I expected, actually." There was no accusation in her tone, just an understanding that made Elara's throat tighten. Adrian gestured toward the doors. "Let's go inside." They walked together into the foyer, Liana and Adrian side by side, Elara a few steps behind, feeling painfully aware of the distance. The butler and several staff stared openly. Whispers spread like wildfire. In the drawing room, Liana sank onto a velvet sofa. Adrian remained standing, tense and restless. "Why did you come back?" he asked. "To see you," Liana replied simply. Elara felt the words like cold water. Adrian inhaled sharply, and for a moment the hurt of 3 years flickered across his features. "You left," he said quietly, without a word. "I thought—" his voice cracked before he steadied it. "I thought you were gone forever." Liana folded her hands. "I know. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you." Elara couldn't bear to witness it anymore. She stood. "I'll give you two some privacy." But Liana's eyes snapped to Elara's. "No, please stay." Elara froze. "I want you to hear this," Liana continued gentler, "because this isn't a story of betrayal or romance. It's a story of survival." Adrian frowned. "Liana," she raised a hand to silence him. "Please, let me speak." The room fell into stillness. When I left, she said, voice fragile yet steady, "I didn't do it because I stopped loving you. I left because your mother told me staying would destroy you, and she was right. You were unraveling, Adrian. You loved me too fiercely, too desperately. You were drowning in the fear of losing me." Adrian's jaw clenched. "That wasn't your burden to fix. It became mine the moment I realized you might choose me over your own future," she whispered. "I couldn't let you do that." Elara felt her breath hitch. Love could be cruel in its devotion. "I was wrong not to tell you," Liana added, "but I couldn't stay and watch you break over me." Adrian's eyes shimmered with something that wasn't quite anger. "You think leaving didn't break me?" Liana's lips trembled. "I didn't expect your family to hide the truth from you. I thought one day someone better suited to you would appear, someone strong enough to love you without collapsing under the weight of it." Her gaze shifted to Elara. "I didn't know it would be you," she said softly, "but I'm glad it is." Elara's breath caught. She hadn't expected kindness. She didn't know what to do with it. A long silence stretched before Adrian spoke again. "Why come back now?" Liana lowered her eyes. Because I heard about the wedding. I needed to know you were safe. I needed closure. Something flashed across Adrian's face, complicated and painful, but Elara could see his posture had changed. When he looked at her now, it wasn't with confusion or avoidance. It was something quieter, more deliberate, as if he were seeing her clearly for the first time since Liana's arrival. Liana rose slowly. I'm not here to reclaim anything. I've made peace with my choices and with the fact that my place in your life ended a long time ago. Adrian swallowed. Liana. No, she said gently. Listen to me. She stepped closer, touching his arm with the lightest graze of her fingertips, one final farewell. You loved me. I loved you. But what we had was not built to last. It was too fragile, too heavy, too consuming. Her voice softened to a whisper. But what you could have with her, that has the chance to heal you, to make you whole. Elara's breath stalled. Adrian's gaze flicked to her slow and searching. Something warm, something hesitant but real moved behind his eyes. Before either of them could speak, footsteps echoed through the hall. Miss Blackwell entered, face pinched with displeasure. You shouldn't be here, she said sharply to Liana. Your part in this family ended years ago. Liana straightened unafraid. I came to free him. Mrs. Blackwell's eyes narrowed. You came to disrupt what stability he has left. No, Liana said. I came to ensure he isn't shackled to a lie anymore. The tension in the room snapped like a string pulled too tight. Elara rose instinctively. A lie? What lie? Mrs. Blackwell's jaw tightened. Liana reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. Its edges worn, its contents ominous. Elara, she said softly, this is something you need to see. She placed the envelope in Elara's hands. Adrian stiffened. What is that? Liana met his eyes, sorrowful. The truth your family kept from all of us. Elara opened the flap. The first page made her breath disappear. Adrian's face went pale, and Miss Blackwell stepped forward sharply as if to snatch it away. But Elara was faster. Her fingers tightened around the documents as she whispered, This changes everything. The chapter closed in silence, a silence thick with secrets ready to break open. The papers trembled in Elara's hands as she stared at the first page, a transcript dated 3 years ago, between Liana and Mrs. Blackwell. Her eyes scanned the words, and each sentence burrowed deeper beneath her skin. Mrs. Blackwell, if you love him, you will leave. Liana, he'll fall apart. Mrs. Blackwell, he already is, and if you stay, he won't survive it. Elara's breath faltered. She lifted her gaze to Adrian, who stood frozen, his face draining of color. He took a step toward her, but she closed the envelope, holding it against her chest like armor. Did you know? She whispered. His throat bobbed. Not then. But now her voice cracked. When did you find out? His gaze dropped to the floor. On the morning of our wedding. The words punched the air from her lungs. So when you looked like the world was collapsing, she murmured, It's because it was. He lifted his head slowly, eyes heavy with a sorrow she couldn't bear to meet. I wanted to tell you, but I could barely understand it myself. Elara stepped back, needing distance. She turned to Liana, who watched with quiet remorse. You should have told him, Elara said, the voice trembling. Liana nodded, pain softening her features. I know, and I'm sorry, but that choice wasn't mine alone. Mrs. Blackwell cut in sharply. Enough! The past is irrelevant. Adrian barked the word, ringing with fury. It's everything. He moved to stand between Elara and his mother, shoulders square, protective in a way she hadn't seen before. You took her from me, he said, voice shaking. You stole 3 years of my life. You made me believe she abandoned me. She did abandon you, Miss Blackwell hissed. No, Adrian said. You abandoned me. You my own family. Mrs. Blackwell's jaw tightened. I did what needed to be done. You were losing yourself. Loving her was destroying you. And what about now, he demanded. What are you trying to destroy this time? Miss Blackwell's gaze flicked to Elara. Cold, assessing. The girl is a complication we cannot afford. Elara stiffened. Adrian stepped forward, fury blazing. You do not speak about my wife like that. The room froze. Even Liana inhaled sharply. Elara's heart stumbled at the word my. His voice had cracked on it, raw, unpolished, real. Mrs. Blackwell recovered quickly. The board will not accept this marriage. It destabilizes everything, your position, your inheritance. I don't care about any of that, he snapped. I'm done letting you dictate my life. Ms. Blackwell's eyes narrowed to slits. So, you'll throw away the company, your future, everything we built. If it means protecting her, Adrian said, looking straight at Elara. Yes, her breath caught on a tremor. His gaze was steady, no hesitation, no uncertainty. Lyanna stepped forward quietly. Mrs. Blackwell, haven't you done enough damage? Mrs. Blackwell stiffened. I did what I had to. No, Lyanna said gently. You did what you feared, and fear is not love. For a moment, something fragile, a crack in the armor flickered across the older woman's face. But it vanished as quickly as it came. She turned sharply and left the room without another word. Silence settled like dust. Elara clutched the envelope, feeling the weight of the 3 lives pressed into its thin paper. Then slowly she moved toward the garden doors. She needed air. She needed space to think. Elara Adrian called, following after her. She stepped into the cool night, wrapping her arms around herself as if to hold her heart together. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I was afraid, Adrian said, stopping a few feet away, as if afraid to get closer, afraid you'd see how broken I am. She turned to him, tears burning hot at the edges of her vision. Adrian, I'm not a solution. I'm not someone your family can slot into your life to fix you. He flinched. I know that. Do you? She choked. Because sometimes it feels like I'm only here to fill the space she left behind. He shook his head fiercely. You're not her shadow, Elara. I swear you're not. She hugged herself tighter. But you're scared of losing me the same way. That's not love, Adrian. That's fear. He stepped closer, breath trembling. Maybe. I don't know how to love without fearing loss. I never learned. But I'm trying. That's not enough, she whispered. His face fell not with anger but with the helplessness of someone finally realizing the limits of his own heart. Elara, he said, voice breaking, tell me what to do. Tell me how to keep you. The words shattered her. She stepped forward slowly, lifting a hand to his cheek. He leaned into it with a quiet sigh that sounded like surrender. I don't want you to keep me, she whispered. I want you to choose me, not because you're afraid, but because you want to. His eyes softened, wet, vulnerable. I do want you. Then prove it, she said gently. Start by stopping this cycle your family built around you. Stop living in their fear. He exhaled shakily, a promise forming in the space between them. Before she could speak again, a soft knock sounded behind them. Lyanna stood in the doorway, expression unreadable. Elara, she said, there's something else you should see. Elara felt her pulse stutter, the night air thinning around her. She followed Lyanna back inside Adrian at her side. On the table lay a second envelope. This one marked, to Elara from L, her name. Lyanna's initial. Elara's breath caught as she opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Her eyes widened. Adrian's did too, and the revelation inside made the entire room tilt. Everything. Elara whispered voice trembling everything they did. Wasn't just about Adrian. She looked up, heart pounding. It was about me. The truth struck hard and deep, reshaping everything she thought she knew, and setting the stage for the final choice none of them could escape. The letter trembled between Elara's fingers. Adrian stood beside her silent tense as she read the words penned in Lyanna's unmistakably delicate script. You were chosen long before you arrived, not because you look like me, because you feel like me, because you care too deeply even when it hurts. Elara swallowed hard, eyes blurring as she reached the final lines. If Adrian is ever to be free of us of the ghosts we left in him, it will be because you stayed, not because you ran. She lowered the letter slowly. The room felt too small, too heavy with breath she couldn't draw. Adrian touched her shoulder carefully as though afraid she might break. Elara, I didn't know. If I had... You didn't choose this, she whispered, but neither did I. His hand dropped. Pain flickered across his face, quiet, hollow. Lyanna stepped back, giving them space. I'm sorry, she said, for all of it, for the part I played, for the weight he still carries because of me. Elara shouldn't have had to carry it too, Adrian said, voice tight. But Elara shook her head. This isn't about blame. It's about what happens now. Miss Blackwell reappeared in the doorway like a shadow summoned by conflict. What happens now, she said coldly, is that Adrian decides whether he remains part of this family. You have obligations, no? Adrian interrupted, stepping in front of Elara. I'm done with obligations, done being manipulated, done watching the people I care about suffer because of you. His mother stiffened, outrage staining her cheeks. You would abandon everything for a girl you barely know. For my wife, Adrian said simply. The room went still. Elara stared at him. He didn't waver, didn't look away. Mrs. Blackwell scoffed. Then you understand the consequences. If you choose her, you will lose everything this family built for you. I'd rather lose everything he said than lose her. Her breath hitched. The sincerity in his voice left no doubt this was the turning point, the final fracture between who he had been and who he was becoming. Mrs. Blackwell said nothing more. She left the room with tight, measured steps, the weight of her defeat echoing behind her. When the door clicked shut, Adrian exhaled as though he'd been holding his breath for years. Elara, he murmured, turning toward her. I want a life that is ours, not dictated by fear, not written by anyone else's hand. She felt her heart unravel thread by thread. And if choosing me means giving up everything you have, he stepped closer, cupping her cheek with trembling fingers. Then let it all go. You're worth more than a legacy I never asked for. Her knees nearly gave way. She reached up, covering his hand with hers. Adrian, she breathed, I don't want to be another sacrifice in your life. I want to be a choice you make with a whole heart. Then hear me now, he whispered. I choose you. Tears blurred her vision, but when he leaned in, when their foreheads touched, the world steadied again. Behind them, Liana gave a soft, bittersweet smile. Then my story ends here, she said, and yours begins. Later, after Liana departed and the house grew quiet, Adrian took Elara's hand and led her outside. The moonlight washed him clean of shadows. There's something I want to give you, he said. She frowned. You don't have anything left. You gave it all up. Not everything. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple velvet box. Inside was a ring, small, elegant, nothing like the extravagant one she wore. This one, he said, voice soft, is not from my family, not from a contract, not from fear. He slipped it onto her finger. This is the ring I give you by choice. Her heart burst open. She threw her arms around him, and he held her tightly, no hesitation, no trembling, no ghosts, just love he no longer feared. Months later, they married again in a small ceremony beneath blooming white magnolias. Adrian kissed her without restraint, without hesitation, without the weight of yesterday. I finally know what peace feels like, he whispered against her lips. It feels like you. Elara smiled because she finally felt it too. Not destiny, not obligation, but love steady, chosen, earned. As they walked hand in hand down the aisle, sunlight breaking through the trees, Elara looked back once as if to acknowledge the ghost that had shaped the story. Then she faced forward toward the life she had built with him, a life finally hers and his. Thank you for staying with us to the very last chapter of this journey. If this story touched you, leave a comment sharing your favorite moment and let us know whether you'd like more stories like this. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss the next love story waiting to unfold.